We're live.
All right.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Brian.
My name's Justin.
Welcome back to Sunday is Not Enough. We are currently going through a year-long Bible study.
The book we don't have in the room with us.
Yep. And we are currently in Numbers and Proverbs. So what, kind of depending on the week, we either read one or two books of the Bible, and then we normally just kind of talk about it, and yeah, kind of where we get led to speak about it. So yeah.
Yeah. So we read through Numbers 1 through 15. That's chapters. A lot happens in Numbers. It's a very slow rolling book, though.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of genealogy,
Mm-hmm.
descendant after descendant. So let's just hop right into Numbers. The setting of Numbers. The book of Numbers opens with Israel's encampment on Mount Sinai. At this point, they've received the law and built the tabernacle.
Yep.
Now they're being kind of organized to begin their journey to the Promised Land. Chapter 1 is like the census of Israel. So this is where you see God commands Moses to count the men 20 years and older so that they're fit for war. And then each tribe's counted, and they get a total of approximately 603,550 fighting men, which
Yep.
it's a good, decent-sized army back then.
Yep.
And that's Levites excluded. Levites are assigned to, at this point, care for the tabernacle and not military duty.
Yeah. So, kind of a little point is when he kind of chooses these men to do these, certain services, it kind of just shows how intentional God is with where He puts us and where, where our role for our life, or kind of maybe a season of our life. So it just kind of shows that He is intentional, and He knows you specifically. He wants you in a specific place for where you're good at, or to make you better at, and you're not like lost in the crowd. And obviously, 500,000,
603,000.
600,000 men. You have your job, and you're not lost.
Yeah, so the lesson I think we see on chapter 1 is God is orderly and He's purposeful. And then we're learning that as people are to be prepared and counted as part of God's mission alone. And we can kind of reflect on that chapter 1 just quickly are you prepared to fight spiritual battles in your life?
Mm.
And that would be the main kind of little, piece of the pie.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of zoom through these a little bit just because there's 15 just in Numbers, and we won't hit too hard on all of them. But chapter 2 is just kind of the arrangement of the camp. At this point, tribes were being arranged around the tabernacle in 4 groupings. You had east, which included Judah, Ashar, and Zebulun.
Mm.
Okay. You had the south, which was Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. You had the west, which was Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And then you had the north, which was Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Here we go with this one again. Naphtali. And then the tabernacle and Levites are obviously smack dab in the center.
Yep.
And the good overview to see of this one is God is the center of the community, and everything in life is to roll around Him. As you see, the tabernacle was in the middle. That's pretty much a chapter 2. We'll keep moving if you're good, unless you want to put something else on it.
Nope, that's it.
Chapter 3, this is where the Levites were set apart. Levites are set apart as a substitute for the firstborn of Israel. They are divided by family. So Gershon was curtains and coverings. Kohath was holy items. Merari was frames, bars, and bases. And then there was a total of 22,000 Levites in the middle of the camp. Our lesson here on chapter 3 would just be God gives us specific roles, and His servants, or or specific roles to his servants, and every task matters no matter what you're doing. So, a good thing to think about right now with you yourself is what has God specifically entrusted you to do. Just because he obviously has you doing some way, or you're serving in your church some way, he's obviously entrusted you to do that. And that's pretty much chapter 3. I mean, there's long chapters, but not a whole lot of extra information.
Yeah, for chapter 3, I have
Yeah.
kind of a little different approach, but I have the Levites were set apart for, obviously holy service and all of that, and kind of like a takeaway. Obviously the Levites weren't like perfect, but God chose them to to do what they were called to do. So kind of a question is like, are you resisting or receiving the calling God's putting on your life as as the Levites were?
Good way to put it. Yeah, when you kind of think of the resisting, and like I mentioned, like even if you're like serving in your church, your band leader, if you are part of the tech team, part of the band, or anything like that, are you declining that calling that they're calling you to help in the church, or are you answering the call and serving God? Chapter 4 gets into deep nitty-gritty of the duties of the Levites. This is where we get specific instructions for transporting the tabernacle. Only the, I'm probably going to say this wrong, the Kohathites, something like that?
Yeah.
Only they were to handle like the most sacred items. But they couldn't touch them like directly.
Right.
I don't know if you know that, if you remember that section. The age range for service at that time was like 30 to 50 years, and then you were pretty much done. That's chapter 4. It was just kind of doing the nitty-gritty of what they're supposed to be doing. Chapter 5 is talking about purity in the camp. This is where there was removal of the unclean people from the camp. Laws about restitution for sin was being placed. Tests for specific adultery was being put in place. And the lesson on chapter 5 really is just purity and trust in justice are necessary in God's community. Meaning we need to be as pure as possible, but be just at the same time in God's community.
Yeah.
Agree? Move on? Stay?
No, move on, dude.
Okay. Chapter 6, we get into like the Nazirite vow and blessing. Nazirites, men or women, vow temporary devotion. No wine. No haircut.
Oof.
No corpse contact. And that's what their temporary devotion was. And then it ends with the Aaronic blessing. And that was in chapter 6, verses 24 and 26. And our quick lesson here is there's power in setting apart time to focus on God. Chapter 7, offerings of the leaders. We see here where the tribal leaders each bring accounts showing unity and generosity. Tribal leaders each bring identical offerings to dedicate the altar. A long but orderly account shows unity and generosity. Got my notes twisted here. Lesson here would be God's honors sacrificial giving done with sincere hearts. So God honors your giving when you have a sincere heart towards Him, not just kind of like I'm giving because I have to.
Yeah, honor and unity. Kind of over 12 days they were bringing these things, kind of showing that no matter what you have to offer, God receives our gifts or our offerings, or kind of whatever you want to call them, and no offering is obviously like too small, or I guess like too big, but for God to receive.
Yeah, so chapter 8, um, we move into this is where the Levites cleansed and set apart. So you see a lampstand, instructions for the tabernacle. Levites go through cleansing and consecration rituals. They replace the firstborn of Israel as servants. Um, Pretty much just what we're looking at here is God's preparing his servants through cleansing and commitment. Um, and then we can kind of think about this on a reflection moment of have we allowed God to prepare and purify us for our service to him? Um, that could be a whole conversation itself. Um,
Yeah.
Pretty much as God prepared you to serve. Um, Typically, if you're not a new coming Christian, you should be already prepared to serve for him.
Yeah, serving is one of the ways we one of the big ways we obviously love him and support the church, and kind of it's almost like a tithe we give. Obviously, it's not like we're not supposed to give our 10%, but it's a way to better the church and to grow the church, and to obviously uh, get the church, like if you like tech or live stream or something, your live stream is reaching more people, and even though you're just kind of a tech person or just a live stream person or sound person or whatever, you're still making a huge impact, allowing the worship to be heard at different homes and outside of the church building.
In a way, you're spreading the gospel.
Exactly. So even though you're not directly on that stage with the preacher or directly not on the stage with the worship team, doing anything, you're still making a huge impact. So doing whatever you can to kind of help or move forward the discipleship of Jesus is, you know, nothing's too small.
Yeah, so we're going to zoom to chapter 9 because it wasn't too much. It just talked about the second Passover and the cloud of guidance, which is pretty much just there was a cloud and fire and it guided their movements. Chapter 10 gets into a little bit more important things like the trumpets of departure. These were silver trumpets used to signal travel and warfare at the time. Um, and then we see Israel, it's finally leaving Mount Sinai and begins journey um, to the Promised Land. Uh, Moses also invites his father-in-law, Hobab, to join them in chapter 10. Um, and we see here that God's just giving clear signals, but we must be ready to respond. So when God gives you a signal to serve, or if you ask him for, something and he gives you the answer and it's pretty clear, you need to move on it. You can't wait. And that's chapter 10 for the most part. And I think the big thing we need to reflect on is we need to make sure that we're tuned into signals by God. Because when he gives them to you, like I said, we just need to move. There shouldn't be a second thought about it.
Yeah, when he gives you the smoke signal of if you whatever if you've been thinking about, if you like play an instrument or something, you've been thinking about, hey, I should maybe doing a worship team, and on Sunday they're like, hey, we are in need of a guitar player or whatever. That's kind of your smoke signal from Jesus to go and kind of put yourself out there for Jesus, and just kind of always having your ears tuned and your heart ready.
Yeah, and I mean, in chapter 11, which is after that chapter 10 of getting movement, we start seeing here there's complaints and God's anger comes out here, and we hear people complain about food, and that man is growing tiresome,
Yep.
and God sends quail, and then a plague, and then we see here Moses is starting to feel overwhelmed, and God appointed 70 elders, and we can kind of see how the church has been built throughout the years here. This is history of the church right here. And I like this lesson, what we put down here for notes for lesson, because it's complaining breeds judgment, God provides, but grumbling dishonors him. So us complaining breeds judgment, which we don't want to be judgmental. And then God still provides for us, but we still grumble, and that still brings dishonor towards him.
Yeah, when obviously when God sent the quail, it was because they were like, Lord, we're hungry. we're in the wilderness. We aren't catching anything or whatever. Um, so he sent the quails, and they were ungrateful for it.
Yeah.
So he, as Justin was saying, sent a plague on them to kind of just show his wrath of,
This shows God's his anger.
yeah, his their ungratefulness of their hearts, because nothing's obviously too small for to be given by God, because the biggest thing in the world is not big enough for the smallest thing from God. So, just kind of a key theme in that, a takeaway, I guess I should say, is um, craving comfort over calling leads to consequences.
Yeah.
So comfort is kind of the you're gonna see the devil, see his ways when you're comfortable. Because when you're comfortable, you're more susceptible to things happening to you that aren't from God, or that maybe distancing yourself from God. So always be uncomfortable, if that makes sense, in in your walk, but not in a sense of being like dissatisfied, or always just like an uncomfortable, if that makes sense. But always put yourself in more uncomfortable situations, situations that you wouldn't normally put in, because it'll make you a better person, and it'll make you a more grateful person for God, because there will be consequences, because when you're comfortable, you're not grateful for the small things like food or house or electricity or whatever. So that's my take.
Yeah. So I guess a good reflection there is, what is our attitude and action in times that we see a lack of discomfort?
Mm-hmm.
You know. So chapter 12 is Miriam and Aaron's jealousy. Miriam and Aaron criticize Moses here and the leadership in marriage. We see God defend Moses, and then Miriam got struck with leprosy.
Amen.
And then we see here that Moses prays over her, and then she's healed even after the 7 days of isolation. The lesson to be learned here is speaking against God, or speaking against God's chosen leaders brings consequences. And the consequence here was Miriam got leprosy.
Yeah. They, kind of going back to the whole like humility. God, values being humble in whatever you do. Whatever you do, and whether you eat or drink, do everything for the glory of God. It's being humble and not rebelling. In Because if your parents or whatever told you to go do the dishes, it's
Get up and go do the dishes.
it's even though, like, let's say whatever, you're like 25 and you're still living at home or something, and your parents are like, hey, with the dishes, and you're like, no, I'm an adult, you can't tell what to do. That's rebellion. So not rebelling, but being humble enough to be like, they're my parents, I should do what they say, because I still love them and they're still my parents. So that's kind of a being humble, and not rebelling against your appointed leaders, um, like Jesus, and not rebelling because you're not too old or too knowledgeable or too wise for Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's right. Chapter 13, it's labeled the 12 spies. 12 spies got sent into Canaan on, can you guess how many days it was? The mission?
No, 2 days.
It's a general number in the Bible.
What?
It's always this many days.
10.
40 days. It's a 40-day mission.
Times 4.
Yeah.
Take it out.
All of the spies agree that the land is good, but 10 give a fear-filled report, meaning 10 was like, this is all the scary things that could happen. And then we we see here Caleb and Joshua as the only expressed faith. So the lesson to be learned from chapter 13 is fear can make us miss the promise of God. God promised the promised land and promised to keep everybody safe.
Boom.
And right here, fear can make us miss that.
And this goes back, obviously, to being uncomfortable.
Yeah, it all links together.
Fear.
And we just need to think, are we looking through challenges through the eyes of faith, or are we looking through challenges in the eyes of fear? And we need to be looking through challenges in the eyes of faith. It's not always the easiest thing to do, because we, as human beings, have a tendency of thinking the worst of everything.
Yeah.
And we need to start seeing the faith in everything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So I'm like, Justin, you should start selling your auto feeders.
There's a lot of fear there. I guess somebody's horse his head open or something. And that's just chapter 13. Chapter 14 is Israel's rebellion and judgment. We see here that the people rebel and want to return to Egypt. God decrees 40 years of wandering, 1 year for each day of spying. The current generation is 20 plus, will not enter the promised land. Israelites try to enter the land anyways and are defeated. So our lesson to be learned here would be delayed obedience is still disobedience and often too late. So we kind of need to think here, is there an area where we're resisting God's will in this life? Because if we are, disobedience is disobedience. God's will is God's will.
I also have another. It's like unbelief can cause us to forfeit God's best plans. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Is not believing, having unbelief, can cause us to forfeit His plans to do our plans.
Correct.
And which is kind of a wild thought, because obviously you're like, well, God's plan is going to happen no matter what. But it His plan even though our kind of choices can definitely alter our situation, for the better or for the worse. So unbelief can cause us to forfeit God's best plans.
Yep. Chapter 15 talks about laws for offerings and of Sabbath. Here is the instructions for offerings once they've reached this land. There's sacrifices for unintentional sin. A man got stoned to death here for breaking the Sabbath.
Yep.
I guess I'd probably get stoned to death because I work on Sunday sometimes.
All the time.
And then God commands tassels on the garments to remember His commands. So the lesson to be learned in chapter 15 is God's grace covers mistakes, but His commands remain holy. So God's grace, how can we put this? God is graceful when we make mistakes, but His commands still remain the only way.
Yeah.
To put it in layman's terms. And that was Numbers 1 through 15. Then, now we got to move on to, it was Proverbs.
God's holy, patient, just, and personal.
Yes.
Amen, brother.
What was it? Proverbs
1 through 7.
1 through 7. Pull up my notes here.
Proverbs is a way different book than Numbers. Proverbs is a book about wisdom. So the first 10 Proverbs, chapters of Proverbs, is all about wisdom wisdom.
1 through 7 is pretty much pursue wisdom, reject folly.
Yeah, so wisdom is often in the Bible referred to as her, she, her, she. It just kind of depends. So it's like she is, like waiting or whatever. So if you're reading this, and it says like she, you're like, well, what did I miss, like a character or something? No, it's referring to wisdom. Um, in the first 10 are wisdom, and then after that is um, basically a list of do's and don'ts.
Yeah. So we jump at Proverbs 1, so the beginning of wisdom. Um, Purpose of Proverbs is to gain wisdom, discipline, and understanding, and that's what it talks about in verses 1 through 7. Um, Verse 7 specifically says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Um, this gives us, Proverbs 1 is giving us a warning against joining the wickedness of the world. Um, Wisdom is personified. She calls out, offering help, but warning of destruction if ignored. So it's kind of like it's almost like our very wise instruction manual for life.
Yeah, it's Proverbs definitely speaks to a lot of like the younger um, generation, the younger demographic, um, because it really just gives us a good like stepping stone, a good foundation of what we're supposed to be looking for. So if you haven't read Proverbs, go ahead and read it.
Jump into it.
Because it's a good book for even the first 10 is just a great book for understanding kind of what good and bad unrighteousness looks like.
Yeah, so Proverbs 2, as we move on down the pipeline, um, this is where we start seeing like the value of wisdom.
Yes.
Um, so it says in this book, I won't name the exact verse, but wisdom must be sought like treasure. So you have to seek wisdom. It's not going to seek you.
Yeah, I have chapter 2, verse 4 through verse 4 and 5. You seek her like silver, then you will understand the fear of the Lord.
Yeah, so what that's pretty much saying is you have to seek the wisdom. The wisdom's not going to seek you. It's kind of like thinking about, there's a parable in life of like older men are usually wiser than younger men. The older man is not going to seek you to give you his wisdom. You're going to seek him, and you're going to tell him the problem, and he's going to give you his wisdom. Same
Amen.
thing here. God gives wisdom in this book, or in chapter 2, to the upright.
Mm-hmm.
We see here that wisdom will protect from evil men and seductive women, because you have to make wise decisions.
Freaking seductive women, dude.
We see here that a life of integrity is safe and enduring. So having the wisdom in life is very important, and you can see the value of it right here in Proverbs 2, but you have to be willing to go seek it.
Wisdom isn't an automatic thing. It's not a thing that you just kind of get when you get baptized or when you're
Correct.
born. Wisdom is a thing that you have to dig for, a thing that you have to basically earn. You have to earn it. It's like it's any type of skill, basically. You have to dig for it, for the Holy Spirit to give you the wisdom and the knowledge to understand it. Because sometimes you'll be reading a book in the Bible, like, I have no idea what that means, and then you'll either have a buddy or a mentor, someone that's older than you, explain it to you, and that's basically what mentors or people that are older than you are for, is because they are more wise and have more knowledge that you just almost kind of just haven't been access to.
Correct.
So wisdom, don't be discouraged. Wisdom isn't an automatic thing. It's a thing that you have to dig for and strive for. But hopefully when you do get it, it really protects your path of where you're going.
Yeah, so we kind of have to think here, are we searching for wisdom? And this is going to go back to the numbers. Are we searching for wisdom the same that we are pursuing our success or our comfort? You know what I mean? You have to seek for the wisdom in order to get success or comfort in God, because you have to be able to make wise decisions in this crazy flipped upside down world we live in.
Yep.
So Proverbs 3, we'll move on down the pipe, was all on trusting God. There's a famous command, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and that's Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. So what this is pretty much saying is, like, don't lean on your own understanding.
Very famous verse.
Honor the Lord with your wealth. You know, God disciplines those he loves. He's disciplining us because he loves us and wants us to succeed even further, just like we would do with our children. Um, you know, wisdom is better than riches and brings peace. So being wise is worth way more than any amount of money, any amount of vehicles, any vehicle, um, any house, tools, whatever, may your riches bring. It's better because in the end it'll bring peace because you're a wise person. And if you're wise, you can make wise decisions to keep peace in different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
A life of wisdom blesses others and avoids fear. So if you're wise with your money, you might be able to give a little bit more here to that person, and you'll be blessing that person with,
Yep.
something good. So we see here that the theme of Proverbs 3 is just trust and obedience, and then bring true peace and security. And we kind of just need to reflect in, where are the areas in our life where we're leaning on our own understanding, because we can't lean on our own understanding. We need to lean on our wisdom, and for more wisdom from God. That's Proverbs 3 pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Proverbs 4, as we move into here, it's kind of this is where we get the father's wise advice. Solomon shares wisdom from his father David in this book, or in this chapter. And get wisdom, though it costs all you have. Get understanding. That's verse 7. So get wisdom, but it's going to cost you. You might have to give up this, or give up that, or give up this hobby, or give up this thing that you're doing.
But not costly in a bad way.
Yeah, it's not going to cost you in a bad thing. It's going to cost you some time to become wise. But in the end...
Yeah, it might cost you not going out to the bar.
Yeah, going out to the bar, or hanging with your buds, or, going and seeing the movie you've been wanting to see, or, going for that Sunday drive that you take, or whatever it may be. But in the end, it's going to be worth it, because you're going to have wisdom.
Yeah,
or you're going to be wiser.
There's also another famous verse in this Proverbs 4. It's above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The heart is the eye of your spiritual life, basically.
Is that verse 23?
Yeah. Did you already say that?
No, it was coming up.
Oh, okay.
In my translations, it says it's the wellspring of life.
Yeah. So, your heart is kind of, it is the life of your soul and your actual human body. So whatever you put into your heart comes out of you.
Yeah, your heart almost controls your actions more than your brain.
Yeah, so if your heart's always set on worldly things, or doing things for other people, not God, or whatever, your actions are going to reflect that. Your life is going to reflect that. So guard your heart, and guard what you do in your daily life, or others people's life. Guard their heart, because everything flows from it.
Yeah. Proverbs 5 is a warning to us about committing adultery. Here we see that there's an adulterous woman's words. They're sweet, but deadly. Sexual sin leads to regret, ruin, and death. We need to stay faithful to our spouse if we're a married person. And it pretty much says, rejoice in the wife of your youth.
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 The youth, dude. Enjoy it.
God sees all paths and judges our ways. Our key verse here is Proverbs 5:21. And the theme of that is guard your purity. It's a matter of life and death. So we need to think here, are we fleeing the temptation of the world, or are we rolling the dice and flirting with it? And we need to make sure that we're fleeing these things
Yeah.
because, and this is all links back to wisdom too. If you're fleeing them, you're being wise and making a wise decision. If you're rolling the dice and flirting with it, just like if you were rolling a dice at a craps table or something, you're gambling your money away, you're not making a wise decision, which means you're not becoming a wiser person.
Yeah.
Is a good way to put it.
God says, this is the only sin that God says to not fight. Do not fight sexual immorality. Run away as fast as you can because you cannot fight it. You will lose every time, no matter how hard you try. You will, roll that dice, and 10 out of 10 times, you will lose. So it's the only sin to say, do not fight that. Do not fight it. Do not, go to war with that sin, but run away from it as fast as you can. Whatever, physically or spiritually or whatever, run away as fast as you can, and do not put yourself in those situations where you have to run away, or where you do that roll that dice and you lose.
Yeah. Rolling down into Proverbs 6, this is where we start getting warnings against folly. We get told here that we need to avoid foolishness, financial entanglements like co-signing or gambling or stuff like that.
Debt and
correct
deceit.
We need to avoid laziness, and it says in there, "Go to the ant, you sluggard." Ants are not lazy little creatures. They work, work, work. A slug will lay there and eat and sleep.
Yeah.
Do slug things. 7 things we see here in this chapter 6 is there's 7 things the Lord hates, and that we see those through verses 16 and 19. Pride, lying, murder, wicked plans, eagerness to do evil, false witness, stirring conflict. So if you're the pot stirrer and you're egging people on to fight and things, you're in the wrong.
Yep.
We see the warning again about adultery and how it can destroy a man's life. Our key verses here is 6 and then verses 16 through 19. And the theme of those is, God detests sin and calls us to wise diligence and moral purity. So we kind of reflect on this, we start thinking about this. Are we taking sin lightly, or are we viewing it on how God does? So are we, and everybody is guilty of it as human beings. Are we sinning and then going, oh, I know I wasn't supposed to do that. I won't do that again. And not taking it light. Are we taking it lightly and not taking it serious? Because God takes every sin serious. It doesn't matter if it's
lying or murder.
Lying or murder. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Or being prideful and having a wicked plan against somebody. It's all the same. Sin is sin no matter what it is. It's all bad. There's only one sin that's obviously greater than the others, and that's just defying God, period.
Yeah. I have a verse in here. It's 6:27. It's can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? So it goes back to the thing I've just said.
You want to try it?
No. So it goes back to the thing I was just saying, is like, you play with fire, you put it in your lap, you're going to be burned 10 out of 10 times. So that's just kind of a better analogy or illustration of, temptation.
And temptation is really hard. It's kind of like, don't push the red button. 9 times out of 10, somebody's pushing the red button.
Yeah, they didn't think about pushing the red button until someone said not to push the red button.
And that's where we get into that temptation thing, or the stirring of conflict. I see that a lot too in this same, you see it where, peer pressure is a thing. Now, you're being peer pressured by your friends to do this or that, as if it's drinking alcohol or, smoking a cigarette, which is terrible anyways, and it smells terrible, so don't do it. Or, try this chewing tobacco. You can get tempted into things in many different ways, and just watching a TV show nowadays, you could be tempted into, sexual sin, or,
For sure.
So it's everywhere you do. We just have to make sure that we're viewing our sins, no matter what it is, just like God views them, and not taking it lightly. Because, like we said, if it's lying to murder, it's all bad. God is graceful and will forgive us as long as we can repent of those and confess of those. Um, but we just need to make sure we're not taking it lightly. We need to take this serious. Proverbs 7, which is the last chapter we read here, is um,
The trap of seduction.
thank you. I was trying to think of a better way to word this.
Um,
Summary of this chapter is right here. We see is wisdom is to be written on our heart like a sister. And how can we break that down a little bit more?
say that again.
It says wisdom is to be written on our heart like a sister. What it's meaning by a sister? Let me get you the biblical term of sister. Give me 1 second.
I have kind of in my notes a really good verse in this in Proverbs 7, chapter or verse 7, or sorry, chapter 7, verse 21 through 23. With persuasive words she left him astray. Little knowing it will cost him his life. So, basically, it's in this instance, it's talking about women, and in this kind of day and age, kind of prostitution and all that was a big thing. So it's talking about a lot of women, but also going to be obviously related to men as well. So don't think we're just kind of attacking women right here, but men being persuasive or with your words can lead your fellow sister astray, or vice versa. So obviously be wise with what you do and your intentions, because you know your intentions well before anything comes out of your mouth. So it kind of has a story of the young man being lured into adultery. And obviously it's a huge thing in young men, but also can be a huge thing at any age. If we're not after whatever 30 or something, we're not immune to it. So it's a deadly trap when sexual morality is put in your face, or temptation or whatever is put in your face. It is a very deadly thing. It's playing with a knife. It's playing with fire. It's playing with a lot of stuff. It's a deadly trap that if you get caught into it, you will be burned. A lot of you'll have a lot of guilt. The devil will have a giant grip on you. You'll lose faith in God, and you'll lose a lot of trust in yourself and in God. So sexual sin is a very huge thing to be taken seriously, even though some people it's a almost kind of a habitual sin in some people's lives that people do, and they don't even think about it.
We just have to be careful because sin always appears attractive.
Yeah.
You want it, it draws you in, and we just have to be careful that we're not getting drawn in. We need to make sure that we're, have our boundaries, even if it's those boundaries with, going to dinner with those guys from work, or, having conversations. If it's something that you don't think you should be having a conversation about, don't have the conversation.
For sure.
It might be a hard thing to do because you don't want to let those people down, but in the end, you need to do what's best for you and what's best for your faith and what's best for God. So we have to be really careful to just have those boundaries of, hey, this sin looks great, but we're not going to do it. You know what I mean? Because it can appear attractive, it can appear that it's harmless, but it's going to lead your life through destruction.
Yeah, and a good kind of defense from that is wisdom and obedience. When you're wise, you know how to fight back, or you know when to run, or you know a bunch of kind of tactics from the Lord to do, because when you obey and you're wise, it is one of the most greatest combos ever, because you know what to do and you do it. So when you know what to do and you know how to do it and you do it, that is an insane kind of just thing against the devil, an insane, you know, I don't even know what word I'm trying to think of. Tactic, thing against the devil.
Verse 27 puts sin and the attraction very clearly, and it states, "Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death." You jump on the sin train, you're leading down that highway, and it's going to put you in the grave, and you're done for. So I guess being
It's like Yellowstone.
not train station,
Train station.
the house to the highway to the grave. If you put your foot into sin, it's like tying a chain around your ankle and dragging you down the highway behind a pickup truck. It'll lead you to death.
And very painful until you die.
And 25 tells us, "Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray in her path." And her being sin here.
Not wisdom.
"Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down the chambers of death." So, and this is right here. I mean, verse 24, it point blank says, "Now then, my sons, listen to me." So it's talking to us. "Pay attention to what I say." And then he goes into the "don't let her heart turn her ways into your straight upper paths." So do not let sin appear so attractive to you that you get drugged to death, because it will take you down, no matter if it's sexual sin or drinking problem, or gambling, or you're losing your house, or whatever else it could be. Don't get wrapped in the tumbleweed of sin, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's funny that one of the best things and one of the worst things are her.
Yeah.
Women can be the best thing and the worst thing in your life.
It's true. That's really true.
But I just thought it was funny after you were talking about that. They're both the best thing, wisdom, and the worst thing, sin. Both labeled as a her.
So a good thing to think about on this last chapter is, what boundaries have you set to resist temptation? Meaning, if it's a blocker on your phone to block certain websites from sexual pornography sin, or having an accountability partner, or covenant eyes on your phone to help with that other stuff, or setting yourself a limit. If you do drink alcohol, I'm only going to drink
That's what I right there.
one beer with the guys. Or if you're a smoker, trying to set yourself a way to stop, stuff like that. Not saying smoking is a sin, but addiction is a sin.
True.
So pretty much our key themes across Proverbs 1 through 7 is wisdom is active pursuit, not passive reception. The fear of the Lord is foundational. Parental instruction is vital and rooted in experience. Ain't that the truth? Amen. Sexual purity is not just moral, it's life-preserving. And temptation is deceitful, and folly is loud. So, with that being said, Brandon, you can pray us out this time.
All right. Dear Father, Lord, I just want to thank you for this time that we've been allowed to read your word and to speak it to many people. Lord, I just pray that this message just reaches many people, Lord, that maybe some people need to hear this message, and hopefully that it can really touch them and make a change in their life, turn back to Jesus, or kind of whatever needs to be done in their life to be changed, that they've kind of just got the motivation or the conviction to do it, Lord. So I just want to thank you for allowing us to hopefully change people's lives and to get back on the straight and narrow, and just pray for an amazing time with these multiple podcasts going on, and that we just continue to preach your word, Lord, with humility and in honor and wisdom, Lord, that you speak to us, and our words are not our own words, but they're your words, Lord. So I just want to thank you for being here and being present with us, and just pray for everyone that's watching or listening, that they have a great rest of their day, and until next week, just thank you for everyone watching. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks for tuning in.